This is one of the coolest things on YouTube. A bunch of Finnish guys building a traditional log cabin with traditional methods, and this guy is hand cutting a dovetail with an axe for a ceiling joist to drop into the top plate. So impressive. So one of the reasons I love this video so much is that I've been messing with lumber and logs and hand tools all my life. In fact, I've got a few of the very same tools here that these guys are using. And I've used calipers kind of like that to select oak trees to have sawn, but I've never done it in snow. But it's a nice dry snow, right? If that makes it any better. This guy's marking the trees to be cut with blazes, and then they're putting them on the ground with traditional tools. And they're pretty good sized trees, you can tell, because they're coming down pretty hard. So this video is on a YouTube channel called Northmen, the Northmen. They've got amazing things. Subscribe to them because you're never disappointed with one of their videos. In fact, at Northmen.com, you can buy from them the traditional Scandinavian tools that they forge in traditional Scandinavian blacksmith shops. I'm a fan. Let's scrub forward and see what else these guys have got. So they are not even using tape measures. They're using sticks to measure off the lengths, bucking them traditionally down in the snow, yarding them with a horse. Everything is pretty old school, which does not necessarily mean inefficient. Those are pine logs. They're not terribly heavy. Do you see that? And it commented here, and I'll comment here, that they're logging these things in the winter when the sap is down. And I think that changes the weight. Now, I may have learned differently, but I have always thought that when the sap is down in the stump, that the log itself is drier. I do know that the bark is stuck tighter, and so they have to peel them with a draw knife here in a little bit, but this horse is leaning into it, and they're taking them out of the woods, I assume directly to the site they're going to build on. Okay, springtime, gotta be. The log is buttressed, it says. All right, so they're going to hew these things to fit, and they start that by chopping indentations perpendicular to the long axis. Okay, pause. So they just use a fairly ordinary axe to put those notches in there, but the notches are going into a plane so that they can take a broad axe and hew from notch to notch to notch in order to make the side of that log beam-like. Check this out. This old guy has got serious hand skill. You keep that shin out of the way if you can. Not a very big broad axe right there. Maybe that, okay, there's a bigger axe. That is essentially identical to this one. That makes me smile. And these things are flat on one side and beveled on the other, so you can either use the bevel or the flat to your advantage. I can't tell, but I'm guessing that the flat comes in contact with the finished piece and the bevel is pushing the piece away. How cool. Okay, there's a line. He's got a string strung there and didn't cut it. All right, satisfaction number 3. This is the same draw knife. You see that? Now this one has been rode hard and put away wet, but it came out of a blacksmith shop somewhere, and that's different than the draw knives that are used inside work. I mean, think of wagon work or furniture work where the piece is entirely shaped before you start. The curve is happening the other way on this to sort of comply with the radius of the log. Those boys are strong. But that bark doesn't come off easy being cut midwinter. You got to fight every bit. All right, foundation time. Man, those roughly hewn. They're talking about the insulation being made from dirt, tamping it around the stones. All right, this is compaction. This is how you get compaction on a traditional structure. Handles on a block. Ventilation, they leave a space between the stones for ventilation. Got to have ventilation. And we're coming up with the floor system. Let's measure to see if it's lopsided. And they're measuring with a board of a predetermined length. The hypotenuse Make it square. Yeah, measuring crosswise is a way to ensure that the corners are square. Yeah, sure. Okay, the underside of each log is carved to match the log below it. Subaltern, great word. And now the joinery starts. Okay, satisfaction number 3. Similar chisel. I got this at a garage sale in Wyoming way back when. Had to modify it. Firmer's chisel is what I've been told it's called. This guy's a better hand than I am. Okay, so this is, okay, and then that is some sort of an oakum, something with tar, it says at some point, filling the cracks, insulate. Look at that. Look at that. Man, that thing's got to fit everywhere. And then they pack, since the 12th century, a round base joint notched as a dog's neck cornered. A dog's neck joint. And then in the 15th century, they started to carve the logs inside walls. Wow. We don't have history like that in Oregon, I can tell you that. Moss between the logs to seal it up. It would be important. A tar oakum. Cutting it off. All right, now here he's making the trunnels or dowels. Drill holes in the logs and drive those in. Ha-ha! There we have it. That looks like work, doesn't it? Looks like serious work. And I think this is even the same diameter. Size of the brace is about 1.5 inches. I think that's what that is. Sleep is not a problem. You can see in that picture the forging marks on the shaft of that thing. Pin them together. Okay, leave a gap to the bottom so the pegs don't carry the log when it sinks. The log's got to be able to go down with gravity as the log's dry. And if the dowel projects too far into the hole below, the dowel runs up against the bottom of the hole beneath and holds the log up, and you get a gap in the wall. So everything has to be accommodating the loss of moisture and the shrinkage of the logs. I guess. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Chop it off. And hit it again. Man, that thing's cutting right along. Doors and window holes of shafts are drilled with a 2-inch brace, a bigger hole, and chop it out. Look at that. Creating a slot at the opening. That's a gauge, I guess. Yes, that's a gauge for the width of the slot. Joint cleft extends halfway through the log, 50%. Using an axe to strike the chisel, sharp on both ends. Pay attention, bud. Look at that, hand control. Sharp, sharp, sharp. The neck of the joint. I don't get that. Look at that, cutting that chamfer. All right, so they're dropping that in. And this is a scribing action. So a scribe is when you are not measuring and making a mark, but physically putting a known distance into a space and making a mark with whatever you're using for the gap. In this case, that looks like some kind of a chisel or something that's scratching the top log and the bottom log at the same time. So regardless of what the log is doing, the distance between the two lines remains the same. Can you see that? And a scribe is often the way to, okay, now that's a different scribe, but it's the same idea. It's gauging the distance to the line that's being scribed. So if you mark it with a pencil and cut it right there, you know that you've removed exactly the amount of wood that you wanted to remove. And this guy looks like he knows how to remove exactly that amount. So as we watch this, and you watch them free-handing these cuts, Notice that in most cases, okay, the log under a carving is fastened with log dogs. Okay, they're going to dog that into place. A very simple kind of a two-pronged hook holds it there so they can work. As they're working, notice that in most cases, they are well set up. They're not chopping out of position. Now sometimes, undoubtedly they are, but they tend to be square to their work. They tend to have both feet flat on some sort of a surface. And now I don't know if you've ever shot a pistol, but you can walk in a series of pistol shots, where every time it hits the ground, you can see if you're moving it closer to being on target. And these axe blows are the same way. If there's ever a deviation from what you were wanting, your eye, your brain, your arms are automatically making the correction in between blows. And so it's the repetition. The first blow is probably alarmingly close with these guys. But from there on out, once they're in position and they've got their body rotating, they don't miss by much. And then there are heavier blows and light finishing blows. Oakum. Moss. Okay, so in some places tarred oakum, in some places moss, and then squish. The scribed, coped joint captures that fibrous, oh, look at that. And so they're marking openings now. Doors and windows, yes. Walls are now at the height of the bottom of the windows, so they're marking the edge. Doors and windows, tops in the same line. Handsaw, coarse, but it's pine. I don't know, I'm guessing that looks like maybe a 6 or a 7 point, wild guess. Down to the line. Layout man going ahead. So this guy's using a lighter axe. Let's say it's kind of like this. And this is another one that's flat on one side and beveled on the other. I am assuming that to hew that flat line, you would not want the bevel leading the axe down into your work. You would want the bevel parallel to your work so it's tending to remain level, so you don't get a series of, you're not chopping in, you're planing off. You're planing in strokes. There's so much going on with his hands and his eyes and his brain. The angle, the location in both directions, how hard he's hitting it. There's a subtle little flex that you can do that when you make contact, the axe can kind of roll to lift the shaving or the sliver or the split up. There's so much going on. It's like you're watching concert pianists at work right now. You just can't hear them. Look at that, just like a plane. Another window's height is measured from the location. They're marking the locations. Oh, I see. He was just throwing a board across there and leveling. Up comes the board. On goes the level. All right, shafts are supporting the window and door openings. This is incredible. Watch this. A T-shaped, a splined, I'm going to call that a trimmer. They're calling that a shaft. I'm calling that a trimmer. This becomes a jam leg, a trimmer that defines the opening. Nice cut. Drop right in. Only long straight grain logs, yes. Carefully dialed about every 1.5 meters. What is that? About every 5 to 6 feet. Whack. Walls, other places. Okay. So here's that splined jam leg trimmer. Look at that. It's fitting everywhere. They stuff that with the oakum and then close it up, just like stuffing insulation around a vinyl window, only nothing like a vinyl window. And they drive it down and back. Look at that. And then this has to drop. That's fitting 1, 2, 3, 4 joints. Tight tolerance. And they left room for that to shrink. Now this is a two-man plane. Other direction. Now that I can understand as far as getting a tighter tolerance, but the axe work is phenomenal. Different cultures, different times. Look at that. All right, they're getting inside. There's that draw knife. Edges are carved, final planing, yes, 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 yes. All of it's work. I'd like to see some footage of them sharpening these things. Ceiling joist jointed to plate. Here's the dovetail joint that we started out with. Freehand. Okay, he's got lines scribed on there. And that is the mortise side of the dovetail. Chop out the back. Ceiling joist. Bam. Wow. All right, so the same thing, but now they're up in the air. They must have some scaffold. Okay, that dog's holding it so he can put his cope joint on the top of that thing. Okay, the gable ends, the logs are gradually becoming shorter to accommodate the pitch of the roof. They've got a stiffener, a strong back standing up there, and what is this? Another joint. Okay, that's the pitch. That's the equivalent of the bird's mouth, only they're putting it in the sill. Firmer's chisel, and that's a template. All right, so that's the roof line they're going to cut. Both sides, ridge poles are in, intermediate poles, fitted. Okay, look at this scarf joint. Look at that. Because we didn't have a log long enough, we jointed two logs together with a hook notch, scarf joint, hook notch. Watch this. Bam. All right. Nailed. Okay, first nail of the day and a little bitty hammer. All right, so they just cut that off to length at the point that the gable end log intersects the pitch. And then it's probably one long hand chop or cut. Eyeballing square up. Look at that, that's a 12-ounce hammer on a 10-inch spike. All right, so now they're hewing the, okay. Bracing up at the top, gonna dial down through there. Not as much shrinkage because that's the top log. Okay, can't stop. So look at the long bevel. I'm not sure I'm looking at that right. No, that's not the bevel. I'm looking at the hamon line. That must be the weld line, maybe. And the bevel is just a standard length bevel. If that's not a Nordic axe, I don't know what is. And see, the bit's not straight. The bit is radiused. It's not this. It is kind of a walking edge, you might call it. I don't think I've even got one here like it. But just to facilitate a gradual intersection with the work. Because you're only taking off a 1/16 of an inch. Inside and outside need to be hewed near the roof and ceiling before building the roof. Look at that. Think he's getting tired of chopping? OSHA approved scaffold. Hewing the outside down to match that splined jam leg. Yeah, 1/16 at a time. Fantastic. This kind of broad axe has been made that way that one can change handle quickly from left to right. Okay, watch this. He pulls the handle out, runs it in from the other way, so that, I think this might be the same way, that the handle could be run in like this, if you need to hew flat here, or run the handle in like this, if you need to hew flat from the other side. That's exactly what he's doing. Coming into the corner, one side has to be flat, and then the other side has to be flat. See, knocks the handle off, turns it around, works from the other side. That's cool. Okay, we're hanging fascia board, or at least the first bit of roof sheeting. To the end of the roof trusses, rafters, are nailed a wind board and a drip board. I think there was a little upturn right there, right? They get a free, so the drip falls right off the edge, falls free. Tight boarding at the overhang and loose boarding. Okay, so it's skip sheeting. It's tight sheeting to the edge of the building and then skip sheeting from there on up. That is, the boards on the overhang are hard up. They're up touching each other, but once you get into the attic space, there's probably a board's width between each set of boards so that there's ventilation out through the shingles, shakes, as the case may be. Okay, look at those boards right there. There's live edge. You see that? Now, I don't know, did they saw? No, those came from a sawmill somewhere. They don't have to show us that. But it's live edge. They're just not fussy. Cutting the corners. Length of the corner to been as thick as the logs. Little longer than the wall log is thick. So if a wall is 6 inches thick, the corner's 7 inches long. I'm going to assume that does two things. It provides additional strength in that notched overhang to resist, the structural connection in the corner, and it's a proportion thing so that it looks good from the end and from the side, because proportion is important. Corners are hewed as thick as the wall. Look at that, chamfers. Yes. Eris, Ken Jordan would tell us. Okay, there's a little upturn. See that? Man, are those things, how did they get? Oh, I see. The outside board must be a little thicker and just pushes it up. 3 shingles. Okay. Next course, full length. Length of the shingle is about 17 inches. Wow. So the fasteners are concealed. That's normal. So that notched story pole is the distance to the top of the next course. Last a quarter of a century, 25 years. That's a reasonable roof guarantee. And now we do the Finnish hewing. Wow. Just wow. Dry dirt floor. Cover the dirt with birch bark. What? Visqueen equivalent, I guess. Dirt logs. All right, so we're putting joists in. We've got notches and some kind of a sleeper there. So they are, in fact, counting on dirt for insulation. But it makes sense, right? I mean, our structures always have to address whatever the nature's dynamic is that we resist in order to live there successfully. And in Finland, it's cold. Cold is a thing that had to be addressed, and they figured out how. Apparently since the, 13th century, they've been doing this. Filling hole has covering, which is dirt floors, boards. Those are next to every 4 wall of bedroom. Sorry, I don't get it, but I am still impressed. You can see the birch bark kind of coming up between the dirt and the pine log. Maybe birch bark is rot resistant? Striking off the sand. I got to call it sand. I have to call that sand. It just hurts to call that dirt. Leaks and can be filled from gaps of dirt floor. Okay. Yes, strike it off. Center is left empty room, which is used in this kind of house for cool repository. You got a refrigerator below the floorboards. And now the window, they didn't make that. Did they make that? Is that a different guy? There should be working room between windows frame, top log for settling, not sinking. So frame is just shimmed in. So as the logs shrink, everything can ease on down. Only to the window hole shafts, yes. Making floor starts with placing dirt floors, boards. Boards are unattached Only the skirting holds them in place, so they're held down with molding apparently. Form a solid floor when fastened together. So what, they nail the second layer to the bottom? Yeah, floorboard only from two directions. So foot is a little wider than the other end. If you guys are making sense of this, let me know. Okay, he scribed with the back of his saw, yes. Goes right in. To avoid warping, yes, I'll bet. And at the same time, great opportunity to brush up a carpenter's skills with traditional tools. I would say so, my friends. Okay, look at the, are those holes or is that just decoration at the top of that entry door? So they've got a whole village here. Finnish Fredericksburg, maybe, huh? Wow. And right here is evidence of why you would pay attention to the insulation. If this does not make you appreciate electricity, I don't know what would. It would probably make us blush a little bit that we begin to think that we have to have cordless tools because it's too much work and too much of an inconvenience to drag around a cord, yes, but let's not be Luddites. I mean, we have to use what is available. But salute to these guys. I mean, I don't know that all of the men we just watched working grew up doing this, or if they're carpenters who have just applied themselves to this in the way that, you know, some of us have positions in colonial Williamsburg and those places that, Williamsburg, not Fredericksburg, where they practice traditional arts for the benefit of people like you and I that go and are compelled and educated and enlightened and grateful to watch them do it. I don't know if these guys were that. I don't know how long ago this video was made, but I do know that this channel, Northmen, has done all of us a great service in putting it out here so we can see how people who really know how to use an axe use an axe. I appreciate the chance to look at these things. And I appreciate the comments that you're going to make and the things that I will learn from your comments that I was too inexperienced or thick to learn watching them do it. So please tell me what it is that jumps out at you watching these guys do it. And then go to the Northmen, will you? And give them a huge thumbs up. And maybe subscribe to that channel, because there are things to be learned on all the videos that they put up, or at least all the ones that I've watched so far. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.